Hello and welcome to Auto Shenanigans. How the devil are you? Have you had a good week? My name is John. Thank you very much for joining me for another exciting Great British Road Journey. This week I've come to Oxfordshire, a county that does a lot of farming and has a university. That's about it. Thanks for watching. See you next time. No, I'm sure there's more to this county than that. We just need to find it, film it and turn it into a video series. With that in mind, today we'll be taking a journey from Banbury to Oxford, but along the way there'll be many diversions and stops to look at some interesting things. As always, to help navigate our way around, we'll be using my 1923 Michelin guidebook, period correct maps, but mostly I'll just be making it up as we go along. In the days of my guidebook, Banbury was a fairly large town with a population of around 13,000. A lot of the town's growth can be put down to the ironstone mining, clay extraction and milling industries, most of which had come to an end by the time my guidebook was published, so we won't be looking at that. But my guidebook suggests maybe we'd like to take a look at the cross. This is the cross, and long ago there were several of these dotted around Banbury, but none of them survived past the year 1600, so it could be that they never even existed at all. In any case, the cross that we see today was built in 1859 to commemorate the marriage of Queen Victoria's daughter, Princess Victoria. In 1914, King George V insisted on the addition of 3 statues to the cross, one of Queen Victoria, one of Edward VII, but most importantly one of himself to celebrate his recent coronation. Today, the cross is now the centrepiece of a rather lovely roundabout. On the north side of the town, we find an Amazon distribution centre which was built on the site of a former aluminium works factory thing, and the giveaway is this old building that looks a bit out of place next to the modern industrial warehouses. It was built in the early 1930s and was part of a huge factory opened by Canadian company, the Northern Aluminium Company. During the Second Small Disagreement of 1939 to 1945, they manufactured aluminium parts for the Spitfire aircraft, and by the 1950s they employed nearly a quarter of the people in Banbury. They continued to trade until the mid-2000s, at which point the company was taken over and a lot of its worldwide factories were closed, including the one here at Banbury. A few years later, the factory's buildings were demolished and replaced with the buildings that we see today. But there is one survivor, and it's that old building that sits out front, which originally would have been used as the aluminium factory's laboratory and research centre. Okay, great. We're going to head out to Banbury along what used to be the A41, which was the main road between Oxford and Banbury until the M40 motorway came along. Today, it's known as the A4260, and what the shit is this junction all about? Yes, it certainly stands out a bit, doesn't it? And it's a product of the 1970s, which explains the stupidly tight corners and slip roads. However, on this occasion, I think we can let them off, given that the speed limit on these roads is relatively low. In the old days, this area was mostly open fields, and our junction nothing more than a simple T-junction, but they built a load of houses, and with the increase in traffic, it was deemed safer to build the flyover junction that we see today. Oh, okay, that explains it. Carrying on, we're going to head towards Bicester, and to get there we'll turn off the main road and use the B4030, which takes us past Upper Hayford, which is mostly made out of an old airfield known as RAF Upper Hayford. The airfield opened in 1918 but would then close in 1920 with the land returned to farming, which was all a big waste of time because only a few years later the land was commandeered once again to build a much larger airfield. What we're looking at today mostly came about in the 1950s when the airfield was handed over to the United States Air Force for them to use as one of their bases. They used the airfield as a home for their strategic bombers, some of the largest aircraft in the fleet, and this required an extended runway to be built, which still remains in place today. In the 1960s, the airfield saw regular visits from the massive B-52 bomber aircraft, but the most interesting aircraft to ever fly from Upper Hayford, at least in my opinion, is the Lockheed U-2, a spy plane that definitely wasn't used to spy on Russia during the small, now escalated to medium cold disagreement. The last aircraft flew out of Upper Hayford in 1993, and today some of the site has been converted into housing, but most of it is now a commercial/industrial estate that happens to look like a Cold War airfield. From military aircraft to military trains next as we head into Bicester, and to the south of the town we find what is or was Bicester Central Ordnance Depot. It opened in 1942 and it became the place for ordnance distribution during the Second Small Disagreement. There are actually 2 sites, the other is a short distance further south, and the 2 sites are linked via a railway known as the Bicester Military Railway. Between the 2 sides there's around 40 miles of standard gauge track which over the years has been used to transport and distribute various munitions. More recently, half of the site is in the process of being turned into housing, and whilst there's still a military presence here, there's an awful lot of stuff just lying about, which makes for a very interesting walk. As for the town of Bicester itself, it's alright. Today it's a busy town with over 37,000 residents, a big jump from the 2,500 that lived in the town in the days of my guidebook. Back then, there wasn't really a great deal to do, and my guidebook suggests no less than 5 churches for us to take a look at. The quickest way out of Bicester for us would be via the A41. However, in the old days this wasn't a thing, so instead we'll follow the smaller local roads through Wendlebury and eventually we'll be forced onto the more modern roads due to the older ones being replaced by the A34. Before we get there though, let's take a look at the M40 motorway's Junction 9. Because of its construction, the road that we're using had to be diverted. The old route would have looked something like this, but in 1991, the motorway's construction meant that the road was rerouted over a bridge, leaving behind some small sections of abandoned road. Continuing with the abandoned theme, vaguely, a short distance down the A34 is the site of a former service station. There used to be a Little Chef restaurant and a petrol filling station here, but today it's just a rubbish Starbucks and no petrol station. Interestingly, the petrol station would be the first to close in the 1990s. It would then sit abandoned because a new petrol station was built a short distance away to the north. But the Little Chef restaurant soldiered on and was doing good levels of business right up until 2012. At this point, the business owners decided to close it and 70 other Little Chef restaurants, marking the start of the end for Little Chef. In 2016, Starbucks would move in, but who cares? A quick detour brings us near to the village of Islip because here we find a 6,500-tonne fuel storage depot that sat about not really doing a lot. It was built in the 1930s as part of the government pipeline and storage system, a system that was designed to deliver fuel to all corners of the country via several sites, just like this one at Islip. It was all built in preparation for that second small disagreement between 1939 and 1945. At the time, the RAF had enough fuel reserves to last all of about one day, 8,000 tonnes, and this wasn't really going to help all that much, so they built several fuel storage sites with interconnecting pipework, increasing the capacity to 800,000 tonnes. Whilst there are some structures at surface level, the majority of the site is built underground and fortified to a certain extent because, of course, you don't want your whole fuel supply going up in flames should the enemy forces decide to attack. Out of around 50 or so sites, only 2 were ever destroyed. After 1945, Esso took over the site at Islip and they used it to deliver fuel to various different locations, including RAF Upper Heyford until its closure in 1994. Onwards to our final town or city of the day, car-hating Oxford, and because I want to end up on the southeast side of Oxford, I'm going to use the B4027, which will allow us to avoid much of the city centre. Genius. Despite Oxford not being too fond of the motor vehicle, Oxford is home to one of the largest vehicle production plants in the UK, and in fact, vehicle manufacturing has been happening in Oxford since 1914, when a chap called William Morris set up a new factory on the site of a former military college. They manufactured the Morris brand of motor vehicle and were the first in the UK to steal or utilise Henry Ford's method of mass vehicle production. The last Morris motor vehicle to be made here was the Morris Ital, which was in production between 1980 and 1984, although by this time Morris had been bought out several times over. There was that whole British Leyland thing, Rover Group, blah 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 blah. The plant is now owned and operated by BMW, who make the Mini. Well, this is stupid. I'm currently on Cowley Road in Oxford and I have fallen into the trap of LTNs, or low traffic neighbourhoods. This is basically where they shut off all of the streets to cars and force everybody down one single road. As a result, I've now driven around Oxford probably 2 more miles than I actually needed to, spreading my horrible diesel fumes everywhere in the process, along with all of the other cars in front of me and behind me that are all queuing down the road. Had the roads been open, I would have been able to just nip through and not even come close to the town centre, but oh well. With all that vehicle manufacturing, it's no surprise that in the days of my guidebook, Oxford was a very busy place with a population of around 57,000. Today, there are well over 160,000 people living in the town, but it's a city, and if you hadn't worked out already, Oxford is the capital, if you will, of Oxfordshire. Some people refer to Oxford as the city of dreaming spires, of which there are several across the city due to its unique or old architecture. The best view, I'm told, is from South Park, a park on the east side of the city centre, so that's where I am, avoiding the city centre. But what do you reckon? Is it a city of dreaming spires or a city of despair? My guidebook suggests that maybe we'd like to take a visit to see Godstone Nunnery or Abbey, which is handily located on the northwest side of Oxford. It was built in the year 1133 and it's the usual story. It's been owned by several people before King Henry VIII f***ed it off in the 1500s. But rather than it be instantly demolished, it was converted into Godstow House, a private residence. But this didn't last very long because during one of several internal disagreements of the time, the house was damaged beyond repair. After that, locals kept coming along and helping themselves to the odd brick or stone to assist them with their own building projects, and very quickly the house was abandoned. And there we are then, guys. That's all we've got time for this week. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you liked the video. If you did, there is of course a button specifically for that, and if you haven't subscribed already, please consider doing so. That would be wicked sweet awesome. Enjoy the rest of your week, whatever it is you get up to. My name's John, these are some cows, and we'll see you guys next time for another exciting Great British Road Journey. Until then, take care, bye-bye. Say goodbye, guys.